Welcome to Stories to Feel, where we chronicle international current affairs with depth and emotion. Ukraine on the brink of annihilation, the U.S. quietly shifts its arms aid. Amid an increasingly brutal war in Ukraine, a covert strategic shift by the U.S. is stirring global attention. Instead of continuing its initial pledge of support to Kyiv, Washington has begun redeploying crucial air defense systems, including tens of thousands of APKWS anti-drone missiles from Europe to the Middle East. This move isn't just logistical. It clearly reflects a change in U.S. geopolitical priorities, as the threat from Iran and the Gulf region intensifies. For Ukraine, this decision deals a heavy blow to an already strained defense infrastructure. Losing APKWS missiles, affordable, effective, and easy to produce, means Kyiv is exposed to successive sophisticated Russian drone waves. Beyond mounting military pressure, Ukraine now risks losing faith in the West's long-term commitment. As the U.S. pivots its strategy, Ukraine is increasingly left to face the flames of war on its own. Russia escalates attacks. Ukraine faces a dual threat. As the U.S. reorients its strategy and reallocates weaponry to the Middle East, Ukraine is experiencing a double hit both materially and psychologically. On the ground, Russia is exploiting defensive gaps in Kyiv's lines to intensify drone strikes, cruise missile assaults, and precision artillery bombardments. Civilian sites and military infrastructure alike are under relentless attack, while Ukraine's air defense is critically weakened due to dwindling Western support. U.S. intelligence reveals that not only anti-drone missiles, but also key components from Ukraine's weapon stocks are being redirected to the Middle East under emergency powers from the Pentagon. As a result, Ukraine is nearly incapable of defending against these sophisticated Russian offensives. With Moscow ramping up its war of attrition tactics, Ukraine cannot scale domestic production quickly enough, and Western hesitancy deepens. The battlefield imbalance is becoming painfully clear, pushing Ukraine perilously closer to the brink. U.S. fears specter of war with Iran in the Middle East. The U.S. decision to redirect military aid from Ukraine to the Middle East isn't random. It signifies growing concern in Washington over the specter of full-scale war with Iran. Over recent months, tensions with Tehran have escalated dramatically. Nuclear negotiations have stalled, U.S. bases endured escalating drone attacks, and Iran seems ever closer to nuclear weapons capability. Under these conditions, the U.S. urgently redeployed air defense systems, even APKWS anti-drone missiles, to hotspots like Iraq, Qatar, and Syria. According to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, this move is essential to protect U.S. personnel and secure strategic bases. But it isn't just defensive. Washington also fears a unilateral Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, a move that could pull the U.S. into an unintended war. Thus, shifting weaponry to the Middle East is a proactive strategy to counter a looming crisis, a ghost threat hovering over the region. India publicly denounces Western double standards. Amid global geopolitical upheaval, India shines as a beacon of independent policy, refusing to align with any bloc, whether Western or Russian. Recent remarks by India's Foreign Minister, Subramaniam Jaishankar, drew intense attention as he sharply criticized Western hypocrisy and double standards in international affairs. Jaishankar posed a direct question. Why does the West continually pressure India to condemn Russian actions in Ukraine, yet remain silent on India's long-standing security issues, especially the ongoing conflict with Pakistan in Kashmir? He argues this bias exposes a brand of expedient politics, where moral calls align only when convenient to Western strategy. The foreign minister emphasized that New Delhi will not be manipulated by calls for morality from countries that once overlooked violations of India's sovereignty. India's decision to maintain relationships with both Russia and Ukraine is a calculated move, reflecting its strategy of independent diplomacy shaped by geopolitical reality and historical experience. At a time when the West attempts to shape global order to serve itself, India's assertive diplomacy reminds us that the world is shifting to a multipolar order, where nations like India refuse passive roles and instead assert independent voices and national interests. Strategic missteps of the West in Ukraine. The prolonged war in Ukraine has not only tested Kyiv's endurance, but also exposed fundamental flaws in Western strategic. NATO awakens to outdated defense doctrine. After over 3 years of brutal conflict in Ukraine, European and NATO leaders are awakening to a hard truth. Their long-held defense doctrine, centered on high-end technology and elite weaponry, is misaligned with contemporary warfare. Ukraine's battlefield has shown that decisive advantage lies not in elite systems, but in the capacity for sustained, high-volume firepower delivered rapidly and reliably. Military leaders like Lithuania's former defense minister Gabrielius Landsbergis warn that while Russia can mass-produce cheap weaponry quickly, NATO countries take years to field a modern artillery or tank system. The lag in industrial response has become a strategic weakness in protracted conflicts. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has acknowledged that dependency on complex supply chains and bureaucratic procurement systems is making NATO slow and inflexible. The imperative isn't to abandon advanced systems, but to strike a new balance between quality and quantity, technology and operational practicality. Without urgent reforms in defense posture, a retooled industrial base, and investments in high-output manufacturing, NATO risks being left behind not by losing technological edge, but by failing to match pace and scale in future geopolitical confrontations. Russia fortifies its status as a military superpower. Amid global escalation and an intensive arms race, Russia is methodically reinforcing its status as a military superpower by modernizing its nuclear forces and developing next-gen strategic weaponry. On June 11th, President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia has nearly completed the modernization of its nuclear triad, including land-based ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and strategic bombers. According to Putin, 95% of Russia's strategic nuclear arsenal now incorporates advanced technology, a percentage surpassing that of other nuclear states worldwide. This represents not just a show of force, but a direct warning to any entity challenging Russia's core interests. Even U.S. Strategic Command head General Anthony Cotton recognized and conceded that Russia currently possesses the most extensive and diverse nuclear arsenal on the planet. Russia's nuclear advancements aren't just deterrent theater. They reflect a long-term doctrine aimed at preserving power balance in a shifting world order. With systems like the RS-28 Sarmat, capable of carrying multiple warheads and piercing modern defenses, Moscow broadcasts a clear signal that it's not merely a powerful adversary, but a decisive player shaping global security dynamics going forward. Russia transitions from nuclear deterrence to total military power. Though Russia commands one of the most sophisticated nuclear arsenals globally, its national defense strategy is no longer built solely on that symbolic deterrent. In a recent meeting on long-term defense planning, President Putin highlighted the need for Russia to foster a modern, agile, and comprehensive military force, deployed not just for nuclear stability, but to respond to evolving security challenges. This marks a significant strategic pivot. Moscow is now heavily investing in autonomous drone warfare, electronic warfare, artificial intelligence, integrated air defenses, and digitized command and control systems. The goal: to build a smart, responsive defense ecosystem capable of withstanding unconventional threats and succeeding across diverse warfare domains. Simultaneously, Russia is modernizing its tactical ground forces and air assets while reducing dependence on clunky, hard-to-deploy systems. Lessons drawn from Ukraine, where drones, cyber tactics, and urban warfare have proven decisive, are actively informing reform in military structure, equipment, and doctrine. This transformation means Russia is no longer a passive nuclear giant, but is evolving into a nimble, multifaceted military powerhouse, prepared for any type of 21st century conflict. Russian UAVs dominate the skies, an arsenal of silent warfare. In the modern age, where technology defines warfare, Russia has swiftly emerged as a formidable force through the deployment of advanced unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. Serving as scouts, artillery spotters, jammers, and even delivering warheads, Russian drones are mastering the skies and redefining conflict, requiring no mass troop deployment or massive explosions. A key innovation is fiber optic controlled UAVs rather than radio signals, immune to electronic warfare. These UAVs maintain stable, uninterrupted data links in jammed environments, enabling accurate targeting, frontline surveillance, and precision destruction. Western analysts believe these small, low-flying, hard-to-detect UAVs have forced adversaries to rethink defensive doctrines. Beyond physical damage, the psychological impact is immense. Soldiers stress under constant surveillance. This exemplifies Russia's asymmetric strategy, technological supremacy without direct confrontation. By turning the Ukrainian battlefield into a technology lab, Moscow is iterating and perfecting drone models in real time. The silent hum of UAVs becomes the most haunting sound of modern warfare, an eerie whisper of dominance. Ukraine's citizens weary, peace with reality sentiment rising. After 3 years of savage conflict, with thousands of military deaths, ruined cities, and shattered economy, Ukrainians are growing deeply weary. Faced with dwindling hope for total military victory, many are now contemplating a more pragmatic form of peace, even if it means ceding some territory. A recent survey from the International Sociology Institute, KIS, found 43% of Ukrainians would accept temporary Russian control over certain regions if paired with firm international security guarantees. Yet a majority, 78%, remains staunchly opposed to surrendering any currently held Ukrainian territory. It's a conflicted reality, craving peace, but not at the cost of national pride. Under the relentless grind of warfare, Ukraine's societal psyche is shifting. Citizens aren't renouncing sovereignty, but are willing to step back if it spares lives and rebuilds the nation. Their quiet resolve sends a clear message: concession is not surrender. Even amid devastation, they hold fast to hope for a reunified future. Trust crisis shakes Ukraine's internal unity. As Russian offensives persist and Western aid ebbs, Ukraine is entering a latent yet perilous trust crisis between its citizens and government. It all started when President Volodymyr Zelensky allegedly rejected a Russian offer to return fallen soldiers' bodies, a basic wartime humanitarian gesture. Ukraine's parliament Vice Speaker Dmytro Razumkov didn't hold back, calling it inhuman to the extreme and urging citizens to demand Zelensky's resignation. Social media erupted, particularly among families of the missing or deceased. For them, the refusal wasn't just callous. It was a betrayal of national dignity amid suffering. In a time when solidarity was Ukraine's strongest defense, a weakening bond between people and government threatens integrity. When collective resilience frays and grief goes unaddressed, even the strongest front line can collapse from within. U.S. begins cutting aid, Ukraine left behind. Exhausted under Russian pressure and civic unrest, Ukraine received another blow from across the Atlantic. The U.S. announced cuts in military aid. During a congressional hearing on the 2026 defense budget, Secretary Austin affirmed a pivot from large-scale arms support to promoting peace negotiations. Though specific cut figures weren't disclosed, Austin's message was clear. The U.S. is no longer willing to pour tens of billions into a war with an unpredictable outcome. Once hailed as a strategic ally, Ukraine now faces the stark reality. U.S. policy has shifted. This downsizing won't just hurt Ukraine materially, it's a psychological blow. Now, Kyiv must explore alternatives, including painful diplomatic concessions on territory and national identity. Russia holds firm in peace talks. As Ukraine grapples with internal division and dwindling aid, Russia remains defiant in negotiations. The Kremlin insists that peace talks can only move forward if Ukraine recognizes Russian sovereignty over annexed territories. Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, comprising roughly 20% of Ukraine's land. This demand isn't new, but highlights Russia's definition of peace. Not a ceasefire, but Ukraine's acquiescence to a new status quo that stamps Russian control as permanent. President Zelensky's administration has rejected it outright, deeming any recognition of illegal annexation unconstitutional and antithetical to national identity. While some Ukrainians lean toward a pragmatic peace, Kyiv's leadership refuses to concede territory, even if it prolongs conflict. The impasse creates two stubborn positions. One side seeks leverage on the ground, the other insists on legal sovereignty. With neither budging, short-term peace seems elusive. Ukraine stands at a fateful crossroads. 3 brutal years have brought Ukraine to a pivotal moment. Its territory devastated, Western support dwindling, and national unity strained. On the battlefield, intensified Russian air and artillery pressure threatens key fronts, while U.S. aid cuts and European hesitation further isolate Kyiv. Internally, fatigue sets in. War weariness, corruption scandals, and political controversies are eroding trust. Ukraine now fights on 2 fronts: against Russia overseas and internal disintegration. Confronting this crisis raises three existential questions: how to hold out amid weapon shortages, how to negotiate without surrendering territory or national pride, and whether the West can deliver security guarantees strong enough to compel Russia to the table. Experts suggest only a soft security, not full NATO membership, but binding bilateral guarantees from the US, UK, France, or a special alliance can provide a lifeline. Though far from ideal, this bridge may be Ukraine's last hope to preserve independence and dignity as the global order rapidly shifts. Thank you for watching Stories to Feel. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to discover more meaningful stories next time.